So let's talk about Labour. In the Thatcher era and her big parliamentary majorities, two of her lieutenants, Quentin Hogg, Lord Hailsham, and Francis Pym, first the basics. In a democracy, I think you need an opposition. Not insiders sniping at the leadership, though that adds to the zest of our politics. It's more profound than that. You need a party with the ability to probe, challenge and expose weaknesses in what the government is doing. And it needs to be a party with a defined set of alternative policies, offering the electorate a clear choice. That's democracy. But too often, oppositions have been like Harry Enfield's grandpa character, constantly bleating, "Oh, you don't want to do it like that," without demonstrating how you do want to do it. Hanging pictures is one thing and worth an Enfield laugh, but when it's health, education, reliable utilities, defence and security, as home and abroad, it's all a little bit more important. Most who've read the Fabian pamphlet, and I know that won't be a huge number perhaps from Sir Keir, remain deeply sceptical that we're any closer having anything approaching a clear vision of what Labour and its leader stands for. Much of the criticisms hinge on the vagueness and the platitudes. There's nothing to frighten the horses and little to fire up the soul. Putting hard-working families and their priorities first and restoring honesty, decency and transparency in public life are fine, but they're hardly going to whip up floating voters into a frenzy nor drive them to the barricades. It's not as if there aren't gaps in the government's defences. Families generally, right now, are wrestling with the gas and electricity crisis, partly caused by an inept and ill-prepared government and a daft cap proposed by Labour, rejected by the Tories, only to be put in place by the Tories. Memories of allegedly dodgy deals at the peak of the coronavirus linger, if you think about it, even briefly, about honesty and transparency in public life. The goal for Labour is surely wide open, but it needs a long-term strategic vision as much as the short-term capacity to clout an inept government. Now, post-war, Clement Attlee had a welfare state vision, and he won. The Tories kind of trundled along somewhat complacently during the 1950s because, I suppose, quote, "we'd never had it so good," as Harold Macmillan said. But Harold Wilson spotted the move from a declining, smokestack economy to a brave new industrial world, emerging from invention and electronics. He urged Labour and the country to master the white heat of that technological revolution. 30 years later, Tony Blair capitalised on what many saw as the cold, heartless drive of Thatcherism that made some very wealthy and left others struggling as the tap of taxpayer subsidies was turned off and stand on your own 2 feet became the mantra. Well, in truth, it served her well and, I'd argue, the majority of the country. But it did leave a space for Blair to offer, quotes, "power through principle and the purpose of the common good." So the motherhood and apple pie stuff have stumped Corbyn, and worse still, other union leaders aren't even bothering to attend the party conference. Big Labour beasts like Andy Burnham and Sadiq Khan are lukewarm too, poised perhaps to challenge Sir Keir. Well, shutting the door on them rather lies in Starmer's hands, but he doesn't seem any closer to it. It all makes it rather more urgent for Starmer to define what the Labour Party of the 2020s is and what it's for. Much of Labour's Keir-Hardie vision, democracy and workers' rights, has been achieved in the 150 years of Labour's existence. But surely no one would argue it's simply job done, or would they? If Labour just wants to say it'll do what Johnson's doing but in a nicer and more efficient way, it won't work. Real Labour supporters won't buy that, and others will conclude that it's probably better to leave those policies to those who actually believe in them, the Tories. If it's back to Clause 4 socialism of Michael Foot and Jeremy Corbyn, it'll be rejected. If it remains an intellectual and political vacuum, it'll be filled by yet another Tory government. So Starmer has his leader's speech next week. He will, I'm sure, put some flesh on those rather thin bones. The election's probably still a year and a half, maybe 2 years away. But there is a lot to do. So my final thought is this, and it's brilliantly captured by Fraser Nelson in today's Telegraph. A leader needs zest, charisma and magnetism, as well as ideas. Due to the Boris Johnson trip to the United Nations, PMQs were contested between Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab and Shadow Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner. You may have agreed or disagreed with much of what Ms Rayner asked and the quips and barbs that she hurled at Raab, but goodness me, she did it with passion and fired up her own side. So maybe it isn't just about what Labour stands for and hopes to offer us. Perhaps it's also about who's crafting the package and offering it. Yes, we really do need to talk about Labour.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.